"Your broke single dad touched my car," she raged. But when the judge shocked the whole courtroom by giving him everything she owned, a storm of revenge, fire, and one final act of forgiveness left everyone asking, how can a man with nothing teach a town what it really means to be rich? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The neon lights of Pete's Diner flickered against the rain-slicked windows as Jack Carter untied his apron. His shoulders ached from 8 straight hours of carrying plates and scrubbing tables, but a small smile played on his tired face. Thursday meant payday, and payday meant he could finally buy Lily those new shoes she needed for school. "Great work today, Jack," Pete called from behind the counter. "Say hi to that sweet girl of yours." Jack nodded gratefully, pulling on his worn jacket. The familiar smell of grease and coffee clung to his clothes as he stepped out into the drizzling evening. His old pickup truck sat waiting in the corner of the lot, its faded blue paint looking almost gray in the dim light. The drive to Lily's after-school program took only 10 minutes. Through the community center's windows, he could see her sitting at a table, bent over what looked like homework. His heart swelled at the sight of her. She was the spitting image of her mother, right down to the way she tucked her hair behind her ears when concentrating. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. "Daddy!" Lily's face lit up as she gathered her books, practically bouncing over to him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and Jack felt the day's exhaustion melt away a little. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, ruffling her hair. "Good day?" "Uh-huh. I got an A on my science project." She pulled the paper from her backpack, proudly displaying the red mark at the top. "That's my girl," Jack beamed. "How about we celebrate with some proper groceries tonight? Maybe get the ingredients for those chocolate chip cookies your mom used to make?" Lily's eyes sparkled. "Really? Can we?" The rain had picked up as they drove to Martin's grocery, fat drops hammering against the truck's roof. The windshield wipers squeaked with each swipe, barely keeping up with the downpour. Jack gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, squinting through the blur of water. The parking lot was surprisingly full for a Thursday evening. Jack circled twice before finding a spot near the back, next to a gleaming black Mercedes that looked worth more than his entire year's salary. "Stay close, Lily," he said as they hurried through the rain, his daughter's small hand warm in his. Inside, the fluorescent lights and cool air made everything feel stark and bright after the gloomy evening outside. They moved through the aisles methodically, Lily reading items off their small list while Jack checked prices and made calculations in his head. "Can we get chocolate chips, Daddy? For the cookies?" Lily asked, pointing to the baking aisle. "Sure can, sweetheart. Why don't you go pick out the kind Mom used to use? I remember they had silver packaging." As Lily skipped off to find the chocolate chips, Jack studied the meat selection, trying to stretch their budget to include a small roast for Sunday dinner. The regular cashier, Mrs. Thompson, had told him about a new discount program for day-old items. "Got them," Lily announced triumphantly, returning with the chocolate chips. "Can we get milk too?" Their cart wasn't full, but it held enough for the week ahead. Jack felt a small surge of pride. He might not be able to give Lily everything, but he could keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. That had to count for something. The rain had become a real downpour by the time they finished shopping. They made a dash for the truck, both laughing as they got soaked despite their best efforts. Jack helped Lily in first, then loaded their groceries in the cab. The truck's bed had a small leak he hadn't had time to fix yet. "Seatbelt," he reminded her, starting the engine. The old truck grumbled to life, and Jack carefully began backing out of their spot. Through the rain-streaked windows, it was hard to see clearly, but he moved slowly, checking his mirrors. Suddenly, there was a slight scraping sound, barely more than a scratch, and Jack's heart dropped. He'd misjudged the distance between his truck and the black Mercedes. "Oh no," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. Before Jack could even put the truck in park, the Mercedes door flew open. A woman emerged, her expensive-looking coat held over her head, face twisted in fury. "You ignorant, careless fool," she shrieked, stalking toward them. "Look what you've done to my car." Jack stepped out of the truck, rain immediately soaking through his jacket. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I'll take full responsibility." "Sorry? Sorry doesn't begin to cover it." The woman, who Jack would later learn was Evelyn Grant, jabbed a manicured finger at his chest. "Do you have any idea what this car costs?" "Of course you don't. Looking at that heap of junk you drive." People were starting to gather despite the rain. Jack felt his face burning with shame, but he kept his voice steady. "I have insurance, ma'am. We can exchange information." "Insurance?" Evelyn let out a harsh laugh. "I'm sure your bargain basement coverage will barely pay for the touch-up paint. No, I'll be taking you to court for every penny you're worth, which clearly isn't much." Jack noticed Lily had climbed out of the truck and was standing close behind him, trembling slightly. Evelyn's eyes darted to her, then back to Jack, her lip curling. "Oh, perfect. Teaching the next generation how to be just as irresponsible? How pathetic." Her voice dripped with contempt. "Well, get ready to explain to your daughter why you'll be working even more minimum wage jobs after I'm done with you." Jack felt Lily's small hand slip into his. His chest tightened with a mixture of anger and humiliation, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Ma'am, please, we can handle this reasonably." "Save it for the judge," Evelyn snapped, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. I'm going to make sure you regret ever touching my car, you worthless." "Stop being mean to my daddy," Lily's voice rang out, surprisingly strong despite her obvious fear. Evelyn's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Control your child, or I'll add emotional distress to the lawsuit." The small crowd of onlookers muttered disapprovingly, but no one stepped forward to help. Jack squeezed Lily's hand gently, then reached into his wallet with his free hand, pulling out his driver's license and insurance card. "Here's my information, ma'am," he said quietly, dignity intact despite the rain streaming down his face. "Do what you need to do." The drive home was silent, except for the steady drum of rain and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. Jack's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his mind racing with worries about lawyers and costs and what this would mean for their already stretched budget. Lily's small voice finally broke the silence. "It wasn't your fault, Daddy." Her hand found his again, offering comfort even as her own voice wavered. Morning sunlight filtered through the threadbare curtains of the Carters' small kitchen. Jack stood at the counter, methodically preparing Lily's lunch, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, and the last chocolate chip cookie from the weekend's baking. His movements were steady, but his mind raced with worries about Evelyn Grant's threats from the night before. Behind him, Lily sat at their worn wooden table, spoon clinking against her cereal bowl. The usual morning chatter was missing, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press down on both of them. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "Are we in big trouble?" Jack turned, forcing his face into what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just get upset over little things. Everything will work out." But even as he spoke the words, a knock at the door made his stomach twist. Through the window he could see the delivery man holding an official-looking envelope. "Keep eating your breakfast, honey," Jack said, moving to answer the door. His hands felt cold as he signed for the envelope and shut the door again. There it was, the court summons. Black text on crisp white paper that could destroy everything he'd worked so hard to maintain. The amount Evelyn Grant was suing for made his head spin. It was more money than he made in 2 years. "What is it?" Lily asked, now standing beside him, her half-eaten cereal forgotten. Jack quickly folded the paper. "Just some grown-up stuff. Come on now, we need to get you to school." The drive to Lily's elementary school was quiet, save for the truck's familiar rattling. As he watched her walk into the building, her backpack seeming too heavy for her small shoulders, Jack's chest ached with worry. At the diner, things weren't much better. Word had spread fast in their small town about the incident with Evelyn Grant. Jack could feel the pitying looks from his co-workers as he tied on his apron. "Hey, Carter," Pete, his boss, called him over. The older man's face was creased with concern. "Heard about what happened with the Grant woman. You okay?" "I'm managing," Jack replied, adjusting his name tag. "Just need to figure out how to handle this court business." Pete shook his head. "That woman's been nothing but trouble since her divorce, always throwing her weight around town. You need any help, you let me know." Throughout his shift, Jack noticed the whispers and glances. Regular customers who usually chatted with him now left smaller tips and avoided eye contact. By lunch rush, his forced smile felt like it might crack. The real blow came when he picked Lily up from school. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched her backpack to her chest like a shield. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked as she climbed into the truck. Lily sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Tommy Miller said his mom told him you're a broke loser who crashes into people's cars." And Sarah laughed and said we probably can't even afford a real car. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He could take the whispers, the looks, even the court summons. But watching his daughter hurt made something deep inside him ache. "Listen to me, Lily," he said, turning to face her. "What other people say doesn't matter. What matters is who we are and how we treat others. Remember what Mom always used to say? 'Kind hearts make rich souls,'" Lily quoted softly, managing a small smile. That evening, after a simple dinner of macaroni and cheese, Jack went through their usual bedtime routine. He helped Lily brush her teeth, listened to her prayers, and tucked her into bed with Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat her mother had given her years ago. "Daddy?" Lily asked as he adjusted her blanket. "Are you scared?" Jack paused, considering his answer carefully. Sometimes grown-ups get scared too. But being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Like when Mom was sick. "And you still smiled for me every day?" Jack's throat tightened. "Just like that, sweetheart." He kissed her forehead and turned on her small nightlight, the one that cast star shapes on her ceiling. "Sweet dreams, my brave girl." In the hallway, Jack pulled the crumpled court summons from his pocket. Under the dim light of the old lamp, the words seemed to blur together. The court date was set for next week. Barely enough time to figure out what he was going to do. Sitting in his worn armchair, he smoothed out the paper with trembling hands. The amount of the lawsuit swam before his eyes. 50-0 for alleged damages to a car that had barely been scratched. It might as well have been $1 million. The courthouse loomed before them, its stone steps slick from the morning's drizzle. Jack Carter adjusted his borrowed tie one last time, grateful that his neighbor had lent him a suit that only slightly hung loose on his frame. Beside him, Lily's small hand squeezed his tightly, her blue dress carefully ironed for the occasion. "Remember what we talked about?" Jack asked softly, kneeling to meet his daughter's eyes. "Be polite, tell the truth, and trust God," Lily recited, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. "That's my girl." Jack straightened up, took a deep breath, and led them through the heavy wooden doors. The courthouse interior was all polished marble and echoing footsteps. Their worn shoes squeaked against the floor as they followed the signs to Courtroom C. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his pace measured for Lily's sake. They found their assigned courtroom with 10 minutes to spare. The moment they stepped inside, Jack spotted Evelyn Grant. She sat in the front row, wearing what looked like a month's worth of his salary in designer clothes. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore an expression of practiced disdain as she whispered to the sleek-suited lawyer beside her. Jack guided Lily to a bench on the opposite side of the room. The wooden seats were hard and uncomfortable, but he was grateful for anything that helped him sit straight. His back ached from the double shift he'd worked yesterday, trying to save every penny he could for what he feared was coming. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Ramirez," the bailiff called out. Judge Ramirez entered, his dark robes flowing as he took his seat. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp as they scanned the courtroom. "Be seated. Case number 2476, Grant v. Carter, regarding vehicular damage and associated claims." Evelyn's lawyer stood first, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Evelyn Grant, is seeking damages for the reckless behavior of Mr. Carter, who damaged her vehicle in a clear display of negligent driving. The repair costs alone." "Approach the bench with the evidence," Judge Ramirez interrupted, his tone clipped. As the lawyer presented photographs of the scratch on Evelyn's car, Jack's stomach churned. The damage looked so minor in the pictures, just a thin silver line across the rear bumper. But he knew the cost of luxury car repairs could be astronomical. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she rose with theatrical grace. "Your Honor, this man's carelessness could have caused a serious accident. He was driving that death trap of his, with a child in the car no less. The emotional distress alone. Mrs. Grant, Judge Ramirez cut in, please stick to the relevant facts. The relevant facts are that he damaged my property, Evelyn snapped, her composure cracking slightly. He should pay for repairs and damages. He needs to learn there are consequences for his actions. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Carter, your response? Jack stood slowly, conscious of every eye in the courtroom. Your Honor, I admit my truck slid in the rain and scratched Mrs. Grant's car. I took full responsibility at the scene and offered to pay for repairs over time. I worked 2 jobs, as a diner cook and a carpenter's assistant. I'm a single father, doing my best to provide for my daughter. I can't pay the full amount immediately, but I'm willing to work out a payment plan. And the weather conditions that evening? Judge Ramirez asked. It was raining heavily, sir. I was driving slowly, but my truck's tires aren't the best. I've been saving to replace them. The judge nodded, then turned back to Evelyn. Mrs. Grant, your insurance report indicates the damage estimate is $2,800, yet you're suing for $25,000. Explain the discrepancy. Evelyn shifted in her seat. The inconvenience, Your Honor. The time without my vehicle, the emotional impact. I see. Judge Ramirez shuffled through some papers. Mrs. Grant, it's come to my attention that you recently filed for divorce. The color drained from Evelyn's face. Her lawyer leaned forward, whispering urgently in her ear. Yes, she said stiffly. But that's hardly relevant. On the contrary, the judge held up a document. This property deed was submitted as evidence of your assets. The address matches a location you claimed was sold last year during divorce proceedings. Care to explain? The courtroom fell silent. Evelyn's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Your Honor, her lawyer interjected, that property valuation isn't pertinent to this case. I disagree, Judge Ramirez said firmly. It speaks directly to character and credibility. He turned to Jack. Mr. Carter, you're a carpenter's assistant? Yes, Your Honor. Part-time work, but I'm skilled at home repairs and restoration. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then straightened in his chair. Here's my ruling, Mrs. Grant. Your attempt to conceal assets during divorce proceedings is a serious matter that will be referred to the appropriate authorities. As for this case, I find your claims of damages grossly inflated and your conduct questionable. He turned to Jack. Mr. Carter, I'm ordering you to pay the insurance deductible of $500 for the vehicle repairs. Jack's shoulders slumped in relief. It would be tight, but he could manage that amount. But the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, Mrs. Grant, as compensation for attempting to exploit this situation, you will transfer the deed to 415 Maple Street to Mr. W.W. Carter, effective immediately. Gasps filled the courtroom. Evelyn jumped to her feet. You can't! I can, and I have, Judge Ramirez said firmly. The property has been abandoned and deteriorating for years, according to city records. Mr. Carter has the skills to restore it, and this transfer will serve as a fair settlement of all claims. Court is adjourned. The bang of the gavel echoed through the stunned silence. Jack sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Property? He owned property? Evelyn stormed past, her face twisted with rage. Her lawyer hurried after her, clutching his briefcase. Daddy? Lily's voice broke through Jack's daze. She was bouncing on her toes, her face glowing. Daddy, we won! Jack gathered her into his arms, holding her close as the reality slowly sank in. They hadn't just won the case, they'd been given a chance at something he'd never dreamed possible. A place of their own. Back in their small second-floor apartment, Jack watched as Lily carefully arranged 6 chocolate cupcakes on their chipped blue plates. The dollar store treats weren't fancy, but the sparkle in his daughter's eyes made them seem like treasures from a 5-star bakery. Can I put the sprinkles on, Daddy? Lily asked, holding up a small container of rainbow-colored dots. Go for it, sweetheart. Jack smiled, leaning against their tiny kitchen counter. The linoleum floor might have been worn, and the cabinets might have needed a fresh coat of paint, but right now, their modest home felt like a palace. Lily scattered the sprinkles with careful concentration, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked. "These are going to be the best victory cupcakes ever." Jack's chest tightened with emotion. Even after everything they'd been through today, his little girl could still find joy in the simplest things. He watched as she placed 2 cupcakes on each plate, one for him, one for her. "Should we do our special celebration dance?" Lily asked, already starting to bounce on her toes. "You bet." Jack grabbed her hands, and they spun around their small kitchen, doing their silly, made-up dance that dated back to when she'd lost her first tooth. Their laughter echoed off the walls, drowning out the usual sounds of traffic from the street below. Later, as they sat at their small kitchen table, Jack studied the property deeds spread out before him. The papers looked official enough, but something nagged at him. Life had taught him that when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. "Is something wrong?" Lily asked, frosting smeared adorably across her chin. Jack quickly folded the papers away. "Not at all, Pumpkin. Just grown-up stuff. Are we going to live in that house now?" "Well," Jack hesitated. "We need to check it out first. Make sure everything's okay with it." Across town, in her sprawling mansion on Highland Avenue, Evelyn Grant paced her marble-floored study. Crystal glasses rattled on her antique sidebar as she slammed her designer purse onto her desk. Her perfectly manicured hands shook as she poured herself a generous measure of expensive scotch. "That insufferable man," she muttered, taking a long sip. "That absolute nobody." She moved to her floor-to-ceiling windows, glaring out at her immaculate gardens. The property she'd worked so hard to hide from her ex-husband's lawyers, gone. Given to some grease-stained mechanic and his sniveling brat. Evelyn grabbed her phone, scrolling through her contacts. She might have lost the battle, but she'd been in this town far too long to go down without a fight. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed out messages to her society friends. "Did you hear about that dreadful Carter man? Conned poor Evelyn Grant right out of her property? Such a shame how some people will do anything for money. I always thought he seemed shifty, working 2 jobs. Who does that unless they're hiding something?" The whispers began to spread through the town's social circles like poison ivy. At the country club, at charity committee meetings, at PTA gatherings, everywhere that mattered, Evelyn made sure Jack Carter's name carried a hint of scandal. Back in their apartment, Jack stood at their living room window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Lily had gone to bed an hour ago, but sleep eluded him. The day's events kept replaying in his mind. Evelyn's face contorted with rage, the judge's surprising ruling, the weight of the property deeds in his hands. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss at the garage. "Heard some strange rumors today. We should talk tomorrow." Another message popped up from a parent at Lily's school. "Is it true what they're saying about you?" Jack's stomach churned. He'd faced down enemy fire during his military service, survived the loss of his beloved wife, and worked himself to the bone to provide for Lily. But this subtle assault on his character, felt different, more insidious. Through the thin walls, he could hear Lily's soft breathing from her bedroom. She'd been so proud today, telling him how she couldn't wait to tell her friends at school about their win. Now he worried about what she might face tomorrow. He moved closer to the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The street below was quiet now, most windows dark. Somewhere out there, Evelyn Grant was plotting her next move. She had money, influence, and a lifetime of social connections at her disposal. All he had was his integrity and his love for Lily. A car alarm went off in the distance, its harsh wail cutting through the night. Jack's jaw tightened as he stared out at the city. The property deed sat on the kitchen table behind him, a victory that now felt hollow. This wasn't just about a fender bender anymore, or even about the property. This was about power, pride, and a wealthy woman who couldn't stand losing to someone she considered beneath her. The bathroom faucet dripped steadily. He'd been meaning to fix it for weeks, but hadn't found the time between his shifts. Now it seemed to count down the minutes until morning, when he'd have to face whatever new challenges Evelyn had set in motion. He reached out and touched the cool glass of the window, watching his fingerprint appear and fade. The city stretched out before him, a maze of lights and shadows, possibilities and threats. Somewhere out there was Evelyn's property, his property now. waiting like a prize that might turn out to be a trap. The sound of Lily turning over in her sleep drew his attention. He could just make out the glow-in-the-dark stars they'd stuck to her ceiling last summer, a small attempt to make their apartment feel more like home. Whatever Evelyn threw at them, he had to stay strong for Lily. She'd already lost one parent. She needed to see that her father could weather any storm. A police siren wailed in the distance, its blue and red lights briefly painting the walls of their apartment. Jack watched it fade away, knowing that his battle with Evelyn Grant was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn as Jack's old truck rattled to a stop in front of their newly acquired property. Lily pressed her face against the passenger window, her eyes wide with wonder despite the building's obvious state of disrepair. "It's like a sleeping house, Daddy," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "Like it's just waiting for someone to wake it up." Jack smiled at his daughter's imagination. The two-story Victorian home had certainly seen better days. Peeling white paint revealed weathered wood underneath, and several shutters hung crooked on rusted hinges. The wraparound porch sagged in places, its boards warped from years of neglect. But beneath the wear and tear, he could see good bones, the kind that might just give them the fresh start they needed. "Ready to take a look inside, kiddo?" Jack pulled the key from his pocket, the one the court clerk had handed him yesterday. Lily bounced out of the truck, her sneakers crunching on the gravel driveway. She skipped ahead, careful to avoid the dandelions that had pushed their way through the cracks in the concrete path. "Maybe we'll find treasure inside. The only treasure I need is right here," Jack said, ruffling her hair as he caught up to her at the front steps. The key stuck slightly in the lock, but with a firm twist, the door creaked open. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams that streamed through dirty windows. The entry hall opened into a spacious living room, its hardwood floors dulled by years of dust, but still solid underneath. Lily's footsteps echoed as she explored, her excitement growing with each new discovery. "Look, Daddy, there's a window seat!" She rushed to the bay window, brushing away cobwebs. "And the kitchen is huge." Jack followed her through the rooms, mentally cataloging everything that needed fixing. New wiring, updated plumbing, replacement windows. The list grew longer with each step. But watching Lily's face light up made every overwhelming detail worth it. "Can I go upstairs?" she asked, already halfway up the creaking staircase. "Careful, honey. Test each step first." Lily moved slowly, one step at a time, treating it like an adventure. At the top, she gasped. "Daddy, come look at this room!" Jack climbed up to find her standing in a decent-sized bedroom with windows facing east. Morning light filled the space, and despite the dusty floorboards and faded wallpaper, he could see why it had captured her attention. "This one," Lily declared, spinning in a circle with her arms outstretched. "This is going to be my room." She stopped spinning and pointed to the walls. "Can we paint it yellow? Like sunshine?" Jack's throat tightened. It had been months since he'd seen her this excited about anything. "Yellow it is, sweetheart. We'll make it the brightest, happiest room in the whole house." They spent the next hour exploring every corner, with Lily chattering about where they could put their furniture and what colors they should use. Jack took pictures with his phone, already planning which repairs to tackle first. The house needed work, but it was theirs, really theirs. "We should get some cleaning supplies," Jack said as they headed back to the truck. "Maybe start with just one room at a time." "Can we get paint samples too?" Lily asked, buckling her seatbelt. "Let's start with the basics today. We've got plenty of time for paint colors." The local grocery store was busy with weekend shoppers when they arrived. Jack grabbed a cart while Lily skipped ahead to the cleaning supplies aisle. He was comparing prices on window cleaner when he realized Lily had wandered around the corner. "I'll be right there, honey," he called out, selecting the cheaper option. Then he heard it, that sharp, cultured voice that made his stomach clench. "Well, if it isn't the little thief's daughter." Jack dropped the bottle in his cart and rushed around the corner. Evelyn Grant stood there in her designer clothes, looking down her nose at Lily, who had backed up against the shelves. "Your father must be so proud," Evelyn continued, her words dripping with venom. "Teaching his daughter that it's acceptable to steal from others. That house belonged to my family, you know. And now you and your conniving father think you can just take it?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "The judge said the judge was fooled by your father's act." Evelyn cut her off. "Playing the poor, struggling single parent. It's disgusting, really. But mark my words, little girl. People like you and your father don't deserve nice things. You'll never belong there." "That's enough," Jack's voice boomed through the aisle. Several shoppers turned to stare as he strode forward, placing himself between Evelyn and his daughter. "You want to come after me? Fine. But you leave my daughter out of this." Evelyn's face twisted into a sneer. "Truth hurts, doesn't it, Mr. Carter?" She adjusted her expensive handbag on her shoulder. "Enjoy playing house while you can, this isn't over." She clicked away on her high heels, leaving behind the sharp scent of expensive perfume and the heavy weight of her threats. Jack turned to find Lily trembling, tears streaming down her face. Hey, he said softly, kneeling down to her level. "It's okay, sweetheart." "She's so mean," Lily whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Why is she so mean?" "Some people let anger make them cruel," Jack said, pulling her into a hug. "But that's their problem, not ours. Let's go home, okay?" They left their cart where it was, cleaning supplies forgotten. The drive home was quiet, with Lily staring out the window, all her earlier excitement drained away. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white, his mind replaying Evelyn's words and the hurt in his daughter's eyes. That evening, after a simple dinner neither of them really ate, Jack tucked Lily into bed. Her room in their apartment seemed smaller than ever now, the walls close and confining after seeing the spacious bedroom at the Victorian house. She clutched her worn stuffed rabbit close, looking so young and vulnerable that Jack's heart ached. He knelt beside her bed, smoothing back her hair. "I'm sorry about what happened today, sweetie. What if she's right?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "What if we don't deserve nice things?" "Listen to me," Jack said firmly, taking her small hand in his. "You deserve every good thing this world has to offer. That woman is wrong. About you, about me, about everything. And I promise you this. No one will ever take your smile away again." The Saturday morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn as Jack's old truck rattled to a stop in front of their newly acquired property. Lily bounced in her seat, clutching her little pink backpack filled with cleaning supplies. Jack grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed, the metal handle worn smooth from years of use. "Ready to tackle this, sweetheart?" Jack asked, studying the two-story house before them. Paint peeled from the wooden siding like old sunburned skin, and thick dust coated the windows. "Ready!" Lily hopped out, her sneakers crunching on scattered gravel. She wrinkled her nose at the musty smell that greeted them when Jack unlocked the front door. Inside, rays of sunlight pierced through grimy windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. Cobwebs draped from corner to corner like forgotten party streamers. The hardwood floors, though scratched and dull, seemed solid beneath their feet. "Look, Daddy!" Lily pointed to an intricate crystal chandelier hanging in the foyer, its facets dulled by years of dust. "It's like Cinderella's castle. Just needs a little magic." Jack smiled at her imagination. He ran his hand along a wall, feeling the good bones beneath the tired surface. The space was generous. A large living room flowed into a formal dining room, and beyond that, a kitchen that had seen better days. "You know what, Lily Bug?" Jack said, his voice echoing slightly in the empty house. "I've been thinking. This place is too big for just us two." Lily looked up from where she was drawing shapes in the dust with her finger. "What do you mean?" "Well," Jack set his toolbox down, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Remember how hard it was when Mama first went to heaven? How sometimes we didn't know how we'd manage?" Lily nodded solemnly. "There are other families out there going through tough times, single parents working multiple jobs, veterans trying to get back on their feet." Jack gestured to the space around them. "What if we turned this into a place where they could stay while they get back on track? A shelter, but more like a temporary home?" Lily's face lit up. "Like how Mrs. Rodriguez from the diner sometimes gives us extra pie when you're short on cash." "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Helping others who need a hand up." They started with the living room, tackling the dust and cobwebs. Jack opened windows, letting fresh air sweep through the stale rooms. Lily hummed as she worked, the same tune her mother used to sing while doing housework. Around midday, a knock at the open door made them both turn. Mrs. Chen from the corner grocery store stood there, holding a paper bag. "I saw you two working," she said with a warm smile. "Brought some sandwiches and lemonade. My Thomas says you're planning something good here." Before Jack could properly thank her, Mr. Peterson from next door appeared with his teenage son, both carrying brooms and buckets. "Thought you might need some help," Mr. Peterson said gruffly. "Place has been empty too long." Throughout the afternoon, more neighbors dropped by. Some stayed to help, others brought cleaning supplies or encouraging words. Jack found himself explaining his vision for the shelter, and with each telling, it became more real. Mrs. Thompson, who taught at Lily's school, nodded approvingly. "This town needs something like this," she said, helping Lily wipe down window frames. "Too many folks struggling alone." Across the street, partially hidden behind her luxury car's tinted windows, Evelyn Grant watched the activity with narrowed eyes. Her manicured nails drummed against her steering wheel as she observed the steady stream of townspeople entering and exiting the property, her property, as she still thought of it. The sight of Jack Carter directing volunteers, of his daughters skipping around with cleaning supplies, made her blood boil. Back inside, unaware of their observer, Jack and Lily worked steadily through the rooms. They discovered small treasures, built-in bookcases, a window seat perfect for reading, kitchen cabinets that just needed new hardware to shine again. "This room could be for kids," Lily declared, standing in a sunny corner bedroom. "We could put bunk beds here, and maybe some toys and books." Jack watched his daughter plan, her hands gesturing enthusiastically. She'd inherited her mother's gift for seeing the best in everything, for finding hope in broken places. As the sun began to set, their helpful neighbors headed home, leaving behind a house that, while still in need of serious work, at least felt clean and full of possibility. The floors had been swept, windows washed, and cobwebs banished. Fresh air had chased away the musty smell, replacing it with the scent of lemon cleaning solution and hope. Jack and Lily stood in the foyer, now able to see the true sparkle of the crystal chandelier above them. Lily slipped her small hand into her father's calloused one. "It feels different now," she said softly. "Like it's waking up." Jack squeezed her hand, looking around at the rooms that had already begun to transform. The overwhelming task of restoration suddenly felt manageable, especially with the community's unexpected support. For the first time since the accident in the parking lot, he felt something close to peace. "Ready to head home, Lily?" "Bug?" he asked, reaching for the keys. "Can we come back tomorrow?" "You bet we can." They locked up carefully, checking each window and door. The setting sun painted the house in warm golden light, making even the peeling paint look less shabby. As they walked to the truck, Lily skipping every few steps, Jack felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the evening Sunday. This place wasn't just a settlement from a court battle anymore. It was becoming something more, a chance to give back, to help others who were struggling like they had. Looking at his daughter's happy face, Jack realized they'd found more than a property today. They'd found purpose. The Monday morning sky hung gray and heavy as Jack's truck pulled up to Pine Grove Elementary. The familiar brick building loomed ahead, its windows reflecting the cloudy daylight. Lily gathered her backpack, decorated with little hand-drawn hearts she'd added over the weekend. "Have a great day, sweetheart," Jack said, reaching over to give her a quick hug. "Remember, I'll pick you up right after school." "Thanks, Daddy." Lily's pigtails bounced as she hopped out of the truck. She adjusted her worn jean jacket, a hand-me-down from a neighbor's daughter that she'd proudly decorated with rainbow patches. Jack watched as Lily walked toward the school entrance. Near the steps, a group of kids huddled together, pointing and laughing at something or someone. As Lily got closer, Jack could see a small boy sitting alone on the bottom step, his shoulders hunched, head down. The boy wore expensive-looking clothes that somehow made him look even more out of place. Lily slowed her steps. Jack recognized that look on her face, the same one her mother used to get when she saw someone hurting. Without hesitation, Lily changed direction and walked straight to the lonely boy. "Hi," Jack heard her say through his rolled-down window. "I'm Lily. Want to share my fruit snacks?" The boy looked up, surprise clear on his pale face. He had dark, careful eyes and neatly combed brown hair. "I'm Michael," he said so quietly Jack could barely hear. The morning bell rang, and students began filing into the building. Jack watched as Lily held out her hand to Michael, helping him up from the steps. The group of laughing kids had already disappeared inside. Later that afternoon, during his lunch break at the diner, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson, Lily's teacher. "Lily made a new friend today. She and Michael Grant worked wonderfully together during group reading." Jack nearly dropped his phone. Grant. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. He quickly typed back, "Michael Grant. Any relation to Evelyn Grant?" The response came quickly. "Yes, her grandson. Sweet boy. Very different from his grandmother." Jack's sandwich sat forgotten as worry churned in his stomach. Evelyn Grant's grandson. The woman who'd threatened to ruin him, who'd cornered Lily at the grocery store with cruel words. That woman's grandson was now his daughter's new friend. He spent the rest of his shift distracted, nearly mixing up 3 orders. The what-ifs plagued him. What if this was some scheme of Evelyn's? What if she used Michael to hurt Lily somehow? What if she poisoned Michael against them? When 3 o'clock rolled around, Jack parked in the school pickup line, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Through the chain-link fence, he could see Lily and Michael sitting on a bench near the playground, their heads bent together over what looked like a comic book. Michael pointed at something on the page, and Lily threw her head back laughing. The sound of her laughter carried across the schoolyard, pure and unguarded. Jack hadn't heard her laugh like that since before the incident with Evelyn in the parking lot. Michael was smiling too, his usual withdrawn expression replaced by genuine joy. Other parents began arriving, and Jack watched as a sleek black car pulled up. Michael's shoulders immediately tensed. A driver in a neat uniform stepped out and called, "Master Michael!" Michael's smile faded. He carefully closed the comic book and handed it back to Lily. "See you tomorrow?" he asked, hope clear in his voice. "You bet," Lily grinned. "We have to finish finding out what happens to Captain Awesome." As Michael walked to his car, Lily spotted Jack and came running. She climbed into the truck, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, I made a new friend. His name is Michael, and he loves Captain Awesome comics too, and he's really nice. And he doesn't have any friends because the other kids make fun of his fancy clothes, but I told him that's silly because clothes don't matter, and—" Jack listened to her happy chatter, his heart caught between joy and fear. Through the rear-view mirror, he watched Michael's car pull away, driven by someone paid to care for him. He thought about the boy's tight shoulders, his careful way of speaking, the surprise on his face when Lily had simply offered friendship. "Can Michael come over sometime?" Lily asked, breaking into Jack's thoughts. "He's never had a tree house, and I told him about the big tree behind our new house and how maybe we could build one someday." Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. Every instinct screamed to protect Lily, to keep her far away from anything connected to Evelyn Grant. But he couldn't forget the sound of her laughter, couldn't ignore how Michael's withdrawn demeanor had transformed in Lily's presence. "We'll see, sweetheart," he said finally. "We'll see." As they drove home, Jack glanced at Lily humming happily in the passenger seat, then in the rearview mirror where Michael's car had disappeared. The boy's loneliness had reminded him too much of Lily's own quiet moments. The times she tried to be brave after losing her mother, after moving schools, after all the changes in their lives. He couldn't bring himself to take away something that brought such light to both children's eyes, even if it meant dealing with the shadow of Evelyn Grant. Sometimes, he realized, love meant letting go of fear, one careful step at a time. The lunch rush at Mel's diner brought the usual clatter of plates and murmur of conversations. Jack moved between tables with practiced efficiency, his order pad tucked in the front pocket of his blue apron. The familiar smell of coffee and grilled cheese sandwiches filled the air as he cleared a recently vacated booth. "Did you hear about that Carter fellow?" A woman's voice caught his attention from the next table. "The one who scammed poor Evelyn Grant?" Jack's hands stilled on the plates he was stacking. His chest tightened, but he kept his movement steady, trying not to draw attention to himself. "Oh yes," another woman replied, stirring her coffee. "She was telling everyone at the garden club meeting. Says he manipulated the court somehow, took advantage of her divorce situation. The plates clinked softly as Jack carried them to the kitchen. He could feel his face growing warm, but he maintained his composure. Through the service window he could see Mel, the owner, giving him a sympathetic look. "Need a break, Jack?" Mel asked quietly, his weathered face creased with concern. Jack shook his head. "Got tables to serve," he replied, managing a small smile. He grabbed the coffee pot and headed back out. As he approached another table, more whispers reached his ears. "That's him right there," someone muttered. "The one who took everything from that wealthy widow." Jack set down the coffee pot and turned to face the table of gossipers. His voice was quiet but firm. "Folks, I'm Jack Carter, and I want you to know that what you've heard isn't true. The court made its decision based on facts, not tricks." The customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding his gaze. Jack continued serving with dignity, though each whisper felt like a small cut to his pride. During his afternoon break, he sat in the empty break room, holding his phone and looking at a text from Lily. "Can Michael come see the house after school, please?" Jack rubbed his tired eyes. The thought of Evelyn's grandson visiting their property made him uneasy, but he couldn't bring himself to disappoint Lily. She'd been so excited about having a real friend. He typed back, "Okay, sweetheart. Make sure his parents know." Later that afternoon, Jack picked up the kids from school. Michael sat quietly in the back seat next to Lily, his dark eyes taking everything in. He was smaller than most boys his age, with neat clothes that spoke of his grandmother's wealth, but there was something gentle about him that put Jack at ease. As they pulled up to the property, Lily practically bounced in her seat. "Wait till you see inside, Michael. Daddy's going to make it beautiful." The old house stood against the autumn sky, its weathered siding and empty windows somehow less forbidding in the presence of children's excitement. Jack unlocked the front door, and the kids followed him inside. "Watch your step," Jack cautioned as they entered. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. He'd managed to clear out most of the debris, and the main room was starting to look less abandoned. Michael walked slowly through the space, his eyes wide. "It's so big," he whispered. "Daddy's going to make it into a shelter," Lily announced proudly. "For people who need help, like veterans and families who don't have homes." Jack watched as Michael traced his hand along a wall where he'd started stripping the old wallpaper. "You're really going to fix all this?" the boy asked. "That's the plan," Jack replied, pulling out his work notebook. He showed Michael his rough sketches for the renovation. "See here? We'll have bedrooms upstairs, a community kitchen down here, maybe even a playground out back someday." Michael studied the drawings with intense interest. "But how will you do it all by yourself?" "He's not alone," Lily declared. "People are helping. Mr. Johnson from the hardware store gave us paint, and Mrs. Peterson brings sandwiches sometimes when we're working." Jack smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. "Community's what makes it possible, Michael. Sometimes people just need a chance to show their better nature." They spent the next hour showing Michael around. The boy grew more animated as Lily described their plans for each room, adding her own imaginative touches to Jack's practical ideas. When they reached the future community kitchen, Michael's eyes lit up. "This is where people will eat together?" he asked. Jack nodded. "Breaking bread together. That's how you build family, even if you're not related by blood." As the afternoon light began to fade, they headed back to the truck. Michael had grown quiet again, but it was a thoughtful silence rather than his earlier shyness. As Jack helped him climb into the back seat, the boy suddenly spoke. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes, Michael?" "Grandma says you're a bad man." Michael's voice was soft but clear. "But I don't think so. Bad men don't build homes for people who need them." Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. He managed a gentle smile and replied, "Thank you, Michael. That means a lot to me." The simple honesty of a child's judgment hung in the air as Jack closed the car door, those words somehow washing away the sting of all the day's whispers and accusations. The autumn sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of the old property as Jack and Lily worked on clearing out decades of accumulated items. They had established a system: salvageable items to the right, trash to the left. Jack wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve as he shifted another heavy box. "Dad, look at this one," Lily called from the corner of what used to be a sitting room. "It's stuck behind these boards." Jack made his way over, carefully stepping around piles of sorted items. Behind some loose floorboards, partially hidden, sat a weathered cardboard box. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized his own handwriting on the side. "Sarah's things." His hands trembled slightly as he pulled it free. I forgot I stored some boxes here years ago," he said softly. "This was your mom's." Lily's eyes widened, and she scooted closer on her knees. "Can we open it?" Jack settled cross-legged on the floor beside her, dust swirling in the sunbeams around them. With gentle hands, he lifted the lid. The familiar scent of his late wife's lavender perfume drifted up, making his throat tight. "Oh," Lily whispered, reaching in to touch a folded sweater on top. "It smells like Mommy." Jack carefully moved aside some photo albums and craft supplies until his fingers brushed something leather-bound. He pulled out Sarah's Bible, its pages worn soft from years of daily reading. Gold letters gleamed faintly on the cover, and colorful sticky notes peeked out from between the pages. "Your mom read this every morning," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. "She'd sit in her favorite chair by the window, cup of tea in hand." Lily traced the gold letters with one small finger. "Can we read some, Daddy? Like she used to?" Jack opened the Bible carefully, and several loose papers fluttered out. He recognized Sarah's neat handwriting, lists of her favorite verses and prayers. A pink sticky note marked Philippians 4:13. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." "Your mom marked this one," Jack said, showing Lily the verse. She'd quote it whenever things got tough. They sat together on the dusty floor, Jack's voice growing stronger as he read more passages Sarah had marked. Words of hope, courage, and faith filled the room. Lily leaned against his shoulder, her eyes closed, drinking in every word. "Mom was really smart," she said after a while. "She knew exactly what verses we'd need today." Jack hugged her close, Sarah's Bible warm in his hands. "She sure did, sweetheart, she sure did." The afternoon light was turning golden when Jack finally closed the Bible. New energy coursed through him, replacing the weariness of the past weeks. He looked around the room with fresh eyes, seeing not the mess and work ahead, but the possibility of what could be. "Lily," he said, standing up and helping her to her feet. "I think it's time we shared our shelter idea with more people. What do you think?" Lily's face lit up. "Really? Can we invite Michael too?" "We'll invite everyone who might want to help," Jack said, already making mental lists. "We'll have a meeting right here." Over the next few days, Jack spread the word carefully. He mentioned it to regular customers at the diner who had always been kind to him. He talked to fellow veterans he knew from his Army days. He even put up a small notice at the local hardware store. When meeting day arrived, Jack and Lily had cleaned up the main room enough to set out folding chairs in a circle. They'd made lemonade and cookies, setting them on a card table by the door. Jack kept checking his watch, nervous that no one would show up. But they did come. First was old Mr. Peterson from the hardware store, carrying a clipboard and wearing his measuring tape like a badge of honor. Then came Maria from the diner with her teenage sons, followed by two of Jack's veteran buddies. A young single mother Jack had helped with car troubles arrived with her toddler. To Jack's surprise, Michael slipped in quietly and sat next to Lily. Jack cleared his throat and stood before the small group, Sarah's Bible resting on a nearby table giving him strength. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady. "I know some of you have heard rumors about how I got this property, but today isn't about that. It's about what we can do with it." He shared his vision of a shelter for struggling families and veterans, a place where people could get back on their feet. As he spoke, he saw heads nodding, saw the spark of possibility catching in other eyes. Mr. Peterson started sketching layout plans right there. Maria's sons offered to help with heavy lifting. The veterans discussed security systems and repairs they could handle. The young mother suggested organizing a donation drive for furniture and supplies. "I can help too," Michael said quietly during a pause. "I'm good at painting." Lily beamed at her friend, then turned to Jack with shining eyes. "See, Daddy? They all want to help." The meeting stretched longer than planned, energy building as people shared ideas and made plans. When the last person left, promising to return with tools on Saturday, Jack and Lily stood in the doorway, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Jack locked up the property, Sarah's Bible tucked safely under his arm. The weight of it felt right, like carrying a piece of her with him. He looked down at Lily's hopeful face and smiled. This is just the start. Saturday morning bloomed bright and crisp, the kind of autumn day that promised possibility. By 8 o'clock, the abandoned property's front yard had transformed into a bustling worksite. Pickup trucks lined the street, their beds filled with tools and building supplies. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with sawdust in the air. Jack stood on the front porch, clipboard in hand, overwhelmed by the turnout. 3 veterans he knew from his support group were already setting up sawhorses. Mrs. Chen from the diner had brought enough breakfast burritos to feed an army. The Martinez family, regulars at Jack's second job, had shown up with paintbrushes and rollers. "Daddy, look how many people came!" Lily bounced on her toes beside him, her small tool belt slightly too big around her waist. Michael stood nearby, equally excited but more reserved, clutching a paper bag of donuts his nanny had helped him bring. "This island, something else," Jack managed, his voice thick with emotion. He cleared his throat. "All right, everyone, let's get organized." The morning unfolded in a symphony of hammering, sawing, and cheerful chatter. Veterans tackled the structural repairs with military precision. Tom, a former Navy Seabee, directed the electrical work. Sarah, an Army Corps engineer, assessed the plumbing with experienced eyes. Lily and Michael became the unofficial refreshment committee, carefully carrying water bottles and snacks to the workers. Their giggles echoed through the halls as they made up stories about who might live in each room once the shelter opened. "This one could be for a mommy and her little girl," Lily declared, gesturing to a room where Mrs. Martinez was applying a fresh coat of pale yellow paint. "And maybe this one for someone like my friend Pete from the VA," Michael added thoughtfully, pointing to another space. "He needs a quiet place sometimes." Around noon, a sleek silver Mercedes crept past the property, moving slower than the posted speed limit. Through the tinted windows, Evelyn Grant's face was barely visible, but her disapproval radiated like heat waves. She watched the volunteers working, her lips pressed into a thin line. Michael spotted her car and ducked behind Jack, suddenly small and uncertain. Jack placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's okay, buddy. You're doing good work here today." The Mercedes accelerated away with a quiet purr, but not before several volunteers had noticed. Tom straightened from his work, wiping his hands on his jeans. "That the lady giving you trouble, Jack?" Jack nodded but managed a smile. "Nothing we can't handle. Let's break for lunch, everyone." The impromptu potluck that followed filled the front yard with delicious aromas and easy laughter. Folding tables appeared, laden with casseroles, sandwiches, and Mrs. Chen's famous potato salad. People sat on lawn chairs, overturned buckets, and the front steps, sharing stories between bites. "My Jennifer would have loved this," Sarah said quietly to Jack, gesturing to the bustling scene. "After I lost her in Afghanistan, places like this, they matter. They really matter." Jack squeezed her shoulder, understanding in his eyes. Across the yard, Lily was teaching Michael how to make proper paper airplane messages for the workers on the second floor. Their laughter carried on the autumn breeze. The afternoon brought more progress. Fresh paint brightened walls that had known only shadows for years. New fixtures replaced rusted ones. The kitchen, though far from finished, began to look like a place where healing meals could be prepared. "Mr. Carter," Michael called out around 4 o'clock, his voice excited. "Come see what we found." In a back corner of the yard, the children had discovered an old garden bed, choked with weeds but still defined by its stone border. Lily was already pulling at the overgrowth, her small hands determined. "Can we make it pretty again?" she asked. "For the people who live here, that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart." Jack knelt beside them, examining the soil. "We'll need to wait for spring to plant, but we can clear it out now." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their progress, Jack called an end to the day's work. Volunteers gathered their tools, exchanging phone numbers and promises to return. The property, though still rough, felt different now, alive with purpose and possibility. The drive home was quiet, both Carters pleasantly exhausted. Lily's head nodded against the window, her tool belt still proudly buckled around her waist. When they finally reached their apartment, they barely managed to kick off their shoes before collapsing onto their worn couch. Dust motes danced in the last rays of sunlight streaming through their window. Jack looked down at his daughter, curled against his side, her face smudged with paint, but glowing with happiness. His own muscles ached, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. "We did good today, didn't we, Daddy?" Lily murmured sleepily. "We sure did, sweetheart," Jack replied, pulling her close. "We sure did." They sat there together, father and daughter, covered in the honest dirt of a day's good work, their shared joy filling the small apartment like a warm blanket. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack adjusted his tie for the 10th time. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed down the navy blue fabric, Sarah's last Christmas gift to him before she passed. The makeshift stage at the front of the room seemed to mock his nerves, its simple backdrop of twinkling lights and hand-painted Hope Harbor Shelter banner swaying gently in the air conditioning. "Daddy, stop fidgeting," Lily whispered, reaching up to straighten his tie herself. Her yellow dress matched the cheerful daisies they'd planted at the shelter last weekend. "You look handsome." Jack managed a wobbly smile, his heart swelling at his daughter's quiet confidence. She'd inherited Sarah's grace under pressure, that was certain. "Thanks, sweetheart. You look beautiful too." He squeezed her small hand, drawing strength from its warmth. People began trickling into the community center's main hall. Jack recognized faces from the diner, the hardware store, and even a few of his fellow veterans. Mrs. Henderson from the library bustled in with platters of cookies. Tom from the auto shop helped set up extra chairs. Each familiar face eased the knot in Jack's stomach just a little. "Look, Michael came!" Lily bounced on her toes, waving to her friend who'd just entered with his parents. Jack noticed they'd dressed up too, Michael in a crisp, button-down shirt that seemed a size too big, probably meant to be grown into. The hall filled quickly, the buzz of conversation growing louder. Jack's throat tightened when he spotted Evelyn slipping into a back corner, her expression unreadable. She wore her usual armor of expensive clothes and perfect makeup, but something about her seemed different tonight, less rigid perhaps. "It's time, Daddy." Lily tugged his sleeve as Pastor Dave stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted as Pastor Dave welcomed everyone and explained the shelter's mission. Jack barely heard the words over the pounding of his own heart, but when it was his turn to speak, he found himself walking steadily to the front, Lily's hand still firmly in his. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Jack began, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about his vision for Hope Harbor. "This shelter isn't just about providing beds and meals. It's about creating a place where people can rebuild their lives, where children can feel safe, where veterans can find purpose again." As he talked, Jack saw heads nodding, saw Mrs. Henderson dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Even some of the town's more skeptical business owners seemed moved by the before and after photos of the property's transformation. "And now," Jack said, his voice softening, "my daughter Lily would like to share something special." Lily stepped forward, her yellow dress catching the light. The piano recording began to play Sarah's favorite hymn, "Amazing Grace." Jack had found the sheet music in her Bible just last week, the pages worn from frequent use. The first clear notes of Lily's voice filled the room, pure and sweet. "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, that saved a wretch like me." Jack's vision blurred with tears. Sarah used to sing this to Lily every night, her voice gentle and sure. Now their daughter stood straight and tall, letting the familiar melody soar to the ceiling tiles. In the back of the room, Evelyn Grant sat very still, her perfectly manicured hands clenched in her lap. As Lily's voice carried the final verse, something in Evelyn's carefully maintained facade cracked. A single tear tracked down her cheek, smudging her expensive mascara. "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." The last note hung in the air like a prayer. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the room erupted in applause, people rising to their feet. Mrs. Henderson was openly crying now, and even gruff old Tom looked suspiciously misty-eyed. In the commotion, Jack noticed Evelyn slip quietly toward the exit, one hand pressed to her mouth. Just before she disappeared through the door, he caught a glimpse of her face, stripped bare of its usual contempt, showing something that looked almost like longing. Michael watched his grandmother go, confusion and concern etched on his young face. But then Lily was running to him, yellow dress swirling, and the two friends shared excited grins about her performance. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and generous donations. People lined up to pledge support, offers of furniture, promises of volunteer hours, checks written with encouraging words. The shelter's future, which had seemed so precarious just weeks ago, suddenly felt solid and real. Finally, as the last guests filtered out and the cleanup crew began stacking chairs, Jack pulled Lily into a tight hug. His daughter smelled of strawberry shampoo and hope, her small arms wrapped fierce around his neck. "Your mom would be proud," he whispered into her hair, voice rough with emotion. "So proud, sweetheart." Lily nestled closer, and Jack held his daughter, his miracle, his strength, as the twinkling lights sparkled overhead like stars. The shrill ring of Jack's phone pierced the early morning silence. He fumbled for it, his mind still clouded with sleep. Through the window, the sun hadn't yet risen, leaving his bedroom bathed in pre-dawn gray. "Jack, you need to come quick." Tom Watson's voice crackled through the speaker. The elderly veteran who'd been helping with the shelter renovation sounded panicked. "The shelter, it's on fire!" Jack bolted upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What? Are you sure?" "I was doing my morning walk when I saw the smoke. Fire trucks are already here, but, Jack, it's bad." The phone slipped from Jack's trembling fingers. He threw off his covers and rushed to Lily's room, finding her curled up with her stuffed rabbit. "Sweetheart, wake up," he said, gently shaking her shoulder. "We need to go." Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy? What's wrong?" "There's an emergency at the shelter. Put on your shoes, quick as you can." They hurried out to the truck, the cool morning air biting at their skin. Lily clutched her rabbit, still in her pink pajamas with cartoon clouds. Jack's hands shook as he turned the key in the ignition. The drive felt endless, though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. They could see the smoke from blocks away, a dark column rising against the lightening sky. As they turned the corner onto Cedar Street, Jack's stomach dropped. 3 fire trucks crowded the street, their red lights painting everything in an eerie glow. Streams of water arced through the air, but the flames had already done their work. The shelter's roof had partially collapsed, and black smoke poured from the broken windows. Jack pulled over, and Lily pressed her face against the window. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. A small crowd had gathered behind the yellow police tape. Jack recognized faces from yesterday's fundraiser now twisted with horror and dismay. He lifted Lily from the truck, and they joined the onlookers. Tom hurried over, his weathered face streaked with soot. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I tried to call as soon as I saw it, but—" He trailed off, gesturing helplessly at the destruction. The fire chief approached, removing his helmet. "Mr. Carter, I'm Chief Reynolds. Once we get the fire fully contained, we'll need to investigate the cause." "The cause?" Jack's throat felt tight. "You mean, the fire started in multiple locations," the chief said quietly. "That's usually a sign of arson." The word hung in the air like poison. Around them, whispers began to circulate through the crowd. "Did you hear? Someone did this on purpose, right after the fundraiser. That rich woman. What's her name? Grant? She's been trying to stop this project." Jack's legs felt weak. He sank onto a nearby bench, pulling Lily close. She buried her face in his shirt, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. The morning crawled by in a blur of official statements and sympathetic touches on the shoulder. The fire was eventually extinguished, leaving behind a blackened shell of what had been their dream. The fresh paint was now scorched, the new windows shattered. All the donated furniture, the children's books, the veterans' resource materials, everything was destroyed. Mrs. Henderson from the quilting circle brought them coffee and hot chocolate around mid-morning. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said, patting Jack's arm. But Jack couldn't feel the Lord's presence in this moment. He could only see months of work reduced to ashes, could only hear Evelyn Grant's voice from yesterday. "This little project of yours won't last." By afternoon, the fire investigators were combing through the wreckage. Detective Martinez pulled Jack aside, notebook in hand. "Mr. Carter, we need to ask about anyone who might have had a reason to do this." Jack ran a hand over his face. "You've probably heard the rumors about Evelyn Grant." The detective nodded. "We'll look into all possibilities. But right now, we need you to stay away from the property while we investigate." Lily hadn't spoken since morning. She sat on the bench, clutching her rabbit, staring at the ruined building. The sunshine that had seemed so promising yesterday now felt like a cruel joke. Tom and some of the other veterans tried to rally spirit. "We can rebuild," they insisted. "We'll make it even better." But Jack could barely hear them. The weight of failure pressed down on him like a physical thing. He thought of all the families who'd been counting on this shelter, all the veterans who needed a fresh start. He thought of Sarah's Bible, now probably reduced to ashes, and felt tears burning behind his eyes. As the sun began to set, he finally took Lily home. She was quiet during dinner, pushing her macaroni around her plate. When bedtime came, she didn't ask for a story. Jack tucked her in, trying to summon words of comfort, but finding none. He was about to turn off the light when her small voice stopped him. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart?" Lily's eyes glistened with tears in the dim light. "Why does God let bad people win?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Jack stood there, hand frozen on the light switch, staring into the darkness beyond her window. For the first time since Sarah's death, he had absolutely no answer to give his daughter. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things he couldn't explain about faith, about cruelty, about why sometimes it seemed like darkness had the upper hand. He just stood there, lost in the shadows of his own doubts, while his daughter's question hung unanswered in the night air. The acrid smell of smoke hung heavy in the morning air, as Jack and Lily stood before the charred remains of their dream. The shelter's blackened beams reached toward the sky like broken fingers, and ash drifted like gray snow across the property. Lily's small hand squeezed his tightly, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by stunned silence. "I'm so sorry, Jack," Mrs. Peterson from the bakery said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Other neighbors gathered in small clusters nearby, their faces etched with concern and sympathy. Some brought coffee in paper cups, others carried boxes of donuts. Small gestures of comfort that somehow made Jack's heart ache even more. He walked slowly through what remained of the front entrance, careful to avoid the still smoldering debris. Each step crunched beneath his boots, the sound of broken glass and charred wood mixing with quiet murmurs from the gathering crowd. Lily stayed close, her eyes wide as she took in the destruction. "All our work," she whispered, bending to pick up a half-burned children's book they'd collected for the shelter's library. The pages crumbled in her hands like autumn leaves. Jack swallowed hard, fighting back the burning in his throat. The newly installed windows were now empty black holes, their curtains reduced to ash. The fresh paint they'd so carefully applied had bubbled and peeled, leaving ghostly patterns on the scorched walls. Even the carefully restored hardwood floors, hours of sanding and finishing, were now warped and broken. "Maybe," his voice cracked, and he had to start again. "Maybe this is a sign, sweetheart. Maybe we were trying to do too much." The weight of defeat pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. He thought of all the donations, the volunteer hours, the hope they'd built here, all gone in one night of senseless destruction. Jack Carter. A familiar voice cut through his dark thoughts. Tom Reynolds, a veteran Jack had helped find work at the lumber yard, strode through the ruins toward them. Behind him came other veterans who'd been helping with the shelter. Mike, who'd done all the electrical work, and Dave, who'd helped with the plumbing. "Don't you dare give up," Tom said firmly, his weathered face set with determination. "You remember what you told me when I was ready to quit looking for work? When I thought nobody would hire a broken-down old soldier?" Jack looked away, but Tom wasn't finished. "You said, the only way we lose is if we stop trying. Well, same goes for you now, buddy." Mike stepped forward, his work boots crunching on the debris. "You gave me back my purpose when you asked for help with this place. Made me feel useful again." He gestured to the ruins around them. This is just another challenge to overcome. We've all faced worse." Dave nodded, adding, "You don't quit, Jack. You taught us that. And we're not letting you quit now." Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve, her face brightening for the first time that morning. "They're right, Daddy. We can't let the mean people win." More voices joined in. Mrs. Peterson announced she'd organize a bake sale. Mr. Johnson from the hardware store offered discounted supplies. Even the local paper's reporter, who'd come to cover the fire, stepped forward to promise positive coverage of their rebuilding efforts. Jack stood in the middle of this surge of support, feeling something shift inside him. The weight didn't lift entirely. It was still there, heavy and real. But somehow it felt more manageable. He looked down at Lily's hopeful face, then at the determined expressions of his friends and neighbors. "It'll be twice as hard this time," he warned, his voice rough with emotion. "Then we'll work twice as hard," Tom replied without hesitation. "You showed us what community means, Jack. Now let us show you." A weak smile tugged at Jack's lips. "I don't know if I have the strength to start over." "You don't have to have all the strength," Mike said quietly. "That's what we're here for. To lend you ours when you need it." Jack ran a hand through his hair, looking around at the destruction again. But this time, instead of seeing only what was lost, he began to see possibilities. The structure was still sound. The foundation remained. Like the veterans had said, they'd all faced worse and rebuilt from it. "Okay," he said finally, his voice soft but steady. "Okay, we'll try again." The words felt fragile in his mouth, like promises made of glass. His spirit, so recently soaring with success at the fundraiser, now flickered like a candle in the wind. But it wasn't extinguished. Not completely. Lily wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his side. "We're Carter Strong, right, Daddy?" Jack placed his hand on her head, feeling the familiar texture of her hair beneath his palm. "Yeah, baby. Carter Strong." The words came out as a whisper, more prayer than declaration. The growing crowd of supporters began to move with purpose now. Some started carefully clearing debris, while others made phone calls to organize supplies and help. Their voices filled the morning air with plans and possibilities, but Jack stood still for a moment longer, holding his daughter close, trying to believe in new beginnings rising from these ashes. 3 days after the fire, Jack stood alone in front of the burned-out shell of the shelter, his work boots crunching on charred debris. The morning sun cast long shadows through the skeletal remains of what had once been filled with so much promise. His shoulders sagged with the weight of defeat. The rumble of engines made him turn. A convoy of pickup trucks pulled into the lot, their beds loaded with lumber and tools. Leading them was Tom, a gruff veteran Jack had helped at the diner months ago. Behind him came Sarah from the hardware store, and the Martinez family from church. "Thought you could use some help," Tom called out, climbing down from his truck. More vehicles arrived, bringing faces both familiar and strange. Jack's throat tightened as he watched people pour out of cars and trucks, carrying tools, water coolers, and determined expressions. "We heard what happened," Sarah said, giving Jack's arm a squeeze. "The whole town's talking about it. But not the way you might think." The Martinez children ran to help unload supplies while their parents started organizing work areas. A local contractor Jack had never met stepped forward, blueprints tucked under his arm. "Name's Bill. I've got some experience with rebuilding after fires. Let me show you how we can make this place even better than before." The sound of running feet made Jack turn. Lily came racing from their truck, Michael close behind her. Their faces were bright with excitement. "Daddy, look!" Lily pointed to where more cars were pulling in. "Miss Thompson brought our whole class." Sure enough, Lily's teacher was helping a group of students unload paintbrushes and rollers. Michael's presence had surprised Jack. He hadn't expected Evelyn to let her grandson anywhere near the project after what had happened. "Mom brought me," Michael explained quietly, reading Jack's expression. "Grandma, she doesn't know I'm here." Throughout the morning the crowd grew. Veterans Jack had helped at the diner showed up in force, their military precision turning chaos into order. Church ladies set up food tables, and someone brought a radio that filled the air with upbeat music. "All right, folks," Tom's voice boomed across the lot. Let's show Jack what community really means. Teams formed naturally. Some cleared debris, while others began framing new walls. The contractor, Bill, moved between groups, offering guidance and expertise. The children, supervised by Miss Thompson, were given safe tasks like painting boards that would later become interior walls. Jack found himself working alongside people whose names he didn't even know. A quiet man in a business suit rolled up his sleeves and worked tirelessly hauling lumber. "I saw you help my sister at the diner last month," he explained simply. "Thought I'd return the favor." By midday, the transformation was stunning. Where there had been ruin, new framework rose toward the sky. The charred debris had been cleared away, and fresh lumber gave off a clean, hopeful scent that overpowered the lingering smell of smoke. Lily and Michael had become the unofficial leaders of the children's painting crew. They worked on boards spread across sawhorses, turning them into colorful masterpieces. Their laughter carried across the worksite, infectious in its pure joy. "Yellow for hope," Lily declared, loading her brush with bright paint, "and blue for peace." Michael, usually so reserved, was grinning as he added his own touches. "Green for new beginnings," he said softly, and Jack felt his heart warm at the boy's words. The afternoon brought even more volunteers. Someone had posted about the rebuild on social media, and people from neighboring towns showed up offering help. A local news crew arrived to cover the story, though Jack politely declined interviews, preferring to let the work speak for itself. "See what you started?" Tom said during a water break, gesturing at the bustling scene. "All these people coming together. That's what this shelter was always meant to be about, wasn't it?" Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Where yesterday there had been only ashes and defeat, today hope bloomed like spring flowers after a long winter. The shelter was more than just walls and a roof. It was becoming a symbol of what people could do when they chose love over hatred. As the afternoon wore on, Jack found himself working near where Lily and Michael were painting. Their childish chatter made him smile. "Your dad's amazing," Michael told Lily, his voice carrying clearly. "He didn't give up, even when bad things happened." "I wish." The boy trailed off, but Jack understood the unspoken words. How different might Michael's life be if he had more influences like this in his daily world? The thought made Jack work even harder, driving nails with renewed purpose. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Despite the growing darkness, no one wanted to leave. Battery-powered work lights came out, and the determined spirit of the day showed no signs of fading. Looking at all the progress, new walls standing straight and true, fresh paint drying on boards, the mountain of supplies donated by caring hearts, Jack felt something shift inside him. The dark cloud of despair that had haunted him since the fire lifted, replaced by a surge of faith so strong it brought tears to his eyes. He stepped away from the bustle for a moment, finding a quiet spot near the edge of the property. The evening breeze carried the sounds of hammering, laughter, and dozens of conversations. Lily's voice rang out clear and sweet as she taught Michael a song her mother used to sing. Jack tilted his face toward the darkening sky, feeling the last warm rays of sunlight on his skin. His heart was so full it felt like it might burst. After everything, the accident with Evelyn, the court battle, the cruel rumors, and even the fire, good had triumphed, not through force or revenge, but through the simple power of people choosing to care. "Thank you for not letting me quit," he whispered heavenward, his voice thick with emotion. The words felt like a prayer, an acknowledgement of grace that had carried him through the darkness to this moment of light. Behind him, the work continued. A symphony of hope being built one nail, one board, one painted wall at a time. The shelter was rising again, stronger than before, built not just of wood and concrete, but of love, determination, and unshakable faith in the goodness that could emerge from tragedy. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Evelyn Grant's mansion, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Michael sat at the massive dining room table, pushing his after-school snack around on his plate. His grandmother watched him from her usual seat at the head of the table, her face pinched with concern at his unusual silence. "Michael, dear, you've hardly touched your food," Evelyn said, her voice carrying that familiar sharp edge that tried to mask itself as sweetness. "Cook made those cucumber sandwiches especially for you." Michael looked up at his grandmother, his young face troubled. "I was at the shelter today," he said quietly. Evelyn's hand tightened around her teacup. "What were you doing there?" "I've told you to stay away from that place, and those people." "I was helping paint with Lily," Michael replied, straightening his shoulders. "Mr. Carter let me pick the color for the children's reading corner. Blue like the sky. That man," Evelyn spat, her facade cracking, "is nothing but a—" "Why do you hate Mr. Carter?" Michael interrupted, his voice stronger than he'd ever used with his grandmother before. "He helps everyone." The question hung in the air between them. Evelyn's face flushed red, and she set her teacup down with a sharp clink. "You don't understand adult matters, Michael. That man took advantage." "No, Grandma," Michael said, pushing his plate away. "You're the one who doesn't understand. Mr. Carter gave Tommy's family a place to stay when they lost their house. He helped Mr. Peterson get his veterans' benefits. He even helped Mrs. Wilson find a job." Evelyn rose from her chair, her hands trembling. "That property was mine. He had no right to—" "But you weren't using it," Michael pointed out, his eyes welling with tears. "It was empty and falling apart. Now it's full of people who need help. People like Lily and her dad." "Lily?" Evelyn's voice caught on the name. "That little girl who follows him around? She's my friend," Michael said firmly. "Her mom died when she was little, just like my mom did. But instead of being angry all the time, Lily and her dad try to make other people happy." The words struck Evelyn like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. "Mr. Carter works 2 jobs, Michael continued, his voice growing softer. "Lily told me sometimes they don't have enough money for new clothes, but her dad always finds a way to help other people. He's not bad, Grandma. He's good. Really good." Evelyn's throat tightened as she watched her grandson defend this man she'd been so determined to destroy. In Michael's earnest face, she saw a reflection of her late daughter, the same determined set of the jaw, the same unwavering belief in doing what was right. "When—" Michael hesitated, then pressed on. "When Mom died, you said we had to be strong. But being strong doesn't mean being mean to people, does it?" Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. The carefully constructed walls of bitterness and pride began to crumble as she looked at her grandson. Really looked at him. For the first time in years. "Mr. Carter gave me this today," Michael said, pulling a small worn book from his backpack. "It's about building things. He said I have good ideas and maybe I could be an architect someday. Nobody ever said that to me before." Evelyn reached for the book with shaking hands. The pages were dog-eared but clean, with careful notes in the margins. Such a simple gift, but she could see how it had lit up something in her grandson's eyes, something she hadn't seen since before her daughter's death. "I don't want to be angry anymore, Grandma," Michael whispered, "and I don't think you do either. It hurts too much." The words pierced through decades of carefully cultivated resentment. Evelyn's vision blurred as she stared at her grandson, seeing for the first time how her bitterness had cast a shadow over his young life. "May I be excused?" Michael asked quietly. "I promised Lily I'd draw some plans for the new playground area." Evelyn could only nod, watching as her grandson gathered his things and left the dining room. The house felt suddenly vast and empty around her, echoing with the truth of his words. Later that night, Evelyn sat alone in her study, a crystal glass of untouched wine on the desk before her. In her hands, she held a silver-framed photograph of Michael, taken last Christmas. His smile in the picture was polite but distant, the smile of a child who had learned to be careful with his joy. How different from the animated boy who had spoken so passionately about Jack Carter and his daughter, about helping others, about building things instead of tearing them down. Tears slipped down Evelyn's cheeks, falling onto the glass of the frame. She thought of her daughter, of the way she used to laugh, of how she would have been ashamed to see what her mother had become. A bitter woman using her wealth and influence to crush a man whose only crime had been trying to make something good out of what she had abandoned. The tears came faster now, years of suppressed grief and anger finally breaking free. Evelyn clutched the photograph to her chest, her perfectly composed world crumbling around her as she faced the truth in her grandson's simple, devastating question. Why did she hate a man who only helped others? In the darkness of her study, surrounded by all the trappings of wealth that had become her armor, Evelyn Grant finally allowed herself to weep. The morning sun painted the rebuilt shelter in shades of warm gold. Fresh white paint gleamed on the walls, and flower boxes bursting with red geraniums lined the newly installed windows. A hand-carved wooden sign above the entrance read, "Second Chance Veterans Family Shelter." Each letter carefully crafted by Jack's own hands. Rows of folding chairs filled the front lawn, where a crowd of townspeople gathered, their excited chatter filling the air. Children darted between the seats, their laughter mixing with the sound of birds singing in the nearby trees. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and joy. Jack stood near the podium they'd set up, tugging at the collar of his only dress shirt. His work-worn hands fidgeted with the paper containing his speech. Lily appeared at his side, wearing her favorite yellow dress, the one that matched the cheerful daisies planted along the shelter's walkway. "You look perfect, Daddy," she whispered, straightening his slightly crooked tie. "Just like Mom always said. You clean up nice." Jack's eyes misted at the mention of his late wife. He squeezed Lily's shoulder, drawing strength from her unwavering faith in him. "Thanks, sweetheart. Where's Michael?" "Right here, Mr. Carter." Michael emerged from the crowd, his usual shyness replaced by excitement. He wore pressed khakis and a blue button-down shirt that seemed a size too big, probably chosen by his grandmother. The mayor stepped up to the microphone, tapping it twice. The feedback made everyone wince, then laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "please take your seats. We're about to begin the dedication ceremony for our town's newest beacon of hope." The crowd settled into their chairs. Veterans who'd helped with the rebuilding sat in the front row, their faces proud. Single mothers who'd volunteered their time held their children close, some wiping away happy tears. Even the diner regulars who donated their spare change were there, beaming like they'd built the place themselves. Jack watched as Lily and Michael found seats in the front row. His daughter's face shone with pride, and Michael, despite his grandmother's absence, looked completely at home among the shelter's supporters. The mayor's introduction was brief, but heartfelt. "And now," she said, "I'd like to invite Jack Carter to say a few words about this remarkable achievement." Jack approached the podium, his work boots scuffing against the new wooden platform. The paper trembled slightly in his hands as he looked out at the sea of familiar faces. Faces that had turned from skeptical to supportive over the past months. "When I first came to own this property," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "it was through circumstances I never expected. Some might even say it was through conflict." A knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. "But standing here today, I see how God can turn any situation into an opportunity for good." He paused, looking at Lily, who gave him an encouraging nod. "This shelter isn't just about providing a roof over someone's head. It's about second chances. Every one of us here knows what it's like to need one. Whether you're a veteran trying to find your way home, a single parent working to keep your family together, or just someone who's lost their way, this place is for you." The veterans in the front row nodded solemnly. One of them, an older man named Frank, who'd helped with the electrical work, wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "When the fire happened," Jack continued, his voice thick with emotion, "I almost gave up. But you, all of you, wouldn't let me. You showed up with hammers and paintbrushes. You brought food for the workers. You donated what you could, even if it was just the change in your pocket." He gestured to the building behind him. "This shelter isn't just my dream anymore. It belongs to all of us." Lily beamed from her seat, her face glowing with pride. Michael sat beside her, clapping enthusiastically. The crowd broke into applause, several people standing to their feet. "So today," Jack said over the cheers, "as we open these doors, remember this: no matter who you are, no matter what mistakes you've made, there's always hope for a new beginning. There's always room for grace." The applause swelled, drowning out his last words. People rose to their feet, some hugging, others crying openly. The mayor returned to the podium, holding up a large pair of scissors for the ribbon cutting. As Jack stepped down from the platform, Lily rushed to hug him. "That was beautiful, Daddy," she exclaimed, her arms tight around his waist. Michael joined them, his eyes bright. "Mr. Carter, you spoke just like my teacher does, when she really means something important." Jack laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Well, thank you, Michael. That's quite a compliment." The crowd began to move toward the shelter's entrance for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jack looked out over the heads of the gathering, his heart full. That's when he saw her. At the very edge of the property, partially hidden by an old oak tree, stood Evelyn Grant. She wore her usual expensive clothes, but something was different. Her face, normally set in lines of disapproval, looked pale and uncertain. Her hands, clutching her designer purse, trembled visibly even from a distance. She stood apart from the celebration, a solitary figure caught between approaching and fleeing. The morning sunlight cast her shadow long across the grass, reaching toward the shelter like a hesitant hand. The cheerful mood at the shelter's dedication ceremony froze as Evelyn Grant emerged from the crowd. Her usual perfectly coiffed appearance was disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her face pale with dark circles under her eyes. The crowd parted like water as she made her way toward the front, her heels clicking against the concrete path. Jack stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges. The speech he'd prepared about second chances lay forgotten before him. Lily, who had been standing proudly beside her father, instinctively moved closer to him, her small hand finding his. Evelyn stopped a few feet from the podium. Her shoulders trembled as she looked up at Jack, then out at the gathered faces, neighbors, veterans, families who would soon call this place home. The silence grew thick, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. Evelyn's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I have something I need to say." More people pressed forward, sensing the weight of the moment. Michael, who had been sitting in the front row, stood up but remained where he was, his young face a mix of concern and hope. "I'm the one who set the fire." The words fell like stones into still water. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by angry murmurs. "I was bitter and angry. I couldn't stand seeing everyone rally around you, seeing the community come together while I sat alone in my big, empty house." Jack's face remained remarkably calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. Lily's grip on his hand strengthened. "I've spent my whole life thinking wealth and status were everything," Evelyn continued, her voice growing shakier. "I treated people terribly. I treated you terribly, Mr. Carter. And then you won that property in court, and I couldn't handle it. I wanted to hurt you like I felt hurt." The crowd's whispers grew louder, some calling for police, others demanding justice. A few people pulled out their phones, ready to call authorities. Jack raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent again. Everyone waited to see how he would respond to this confession. He had every right to be angry. The fire had destroyed weeks of work, endangered lives, and nearly crushed the dreams of so many people who needed this shelter. He stepped away from the podium, gently releasing Lily's hand. Walking down the few steps to ground level, he stood face to face with Evelyn. His expression was not one of anger or triumph, but of compassion. "The day my truck hit your car," Jack said, his voice carrying clearly across the lawn, "you called me pathetic. You said you'd ruin me." He paused, looking around at the rebuilt shelter, at the faces of his supporters. But something beautiful came from that moment. This shelter, this community, it all started because of that day. Evelyn's shoulders shook as she tried to hold back tears. "I don't deserve your kindness. I deserve to be punished." "Maybe," Jack agreed softly. "But hatred ends when someone chooses grace." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Michael took a step forward, hope blooming on his face. "I forgive you, Mrs. Grant," Jack said clearly, extending his hand to her. "And I hope you'll join us in making this shelter a place of healing for everyone who needs it." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to pause their morning songs. Evelyn stared at Jack's outstretched hand, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "How?" she whispered. "How can you forgive me so easily?" "Because holding on to bitterness only hurts ourselves," Jack replied. "I learned that after losing my wife. And because your grandson showed me there's good in everyone, even when they've forgotten it themselves." At the mention of Michael, Evelyn's composure crumbled completely. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Jack hadn't caught her arm to steady her. Michael rushed forward then, wrapping his arms around his grandmother's waist. "It's okay, Grandma," Michael said, his voice muffled against her side. "It's okay." Evelyn's sobs echoed across the lawn as she held onto her grandson, years of bitterness and loneliness pouring out. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the proud, bitter woman who had terrorized their town broke down in her grandson's embrace. Jack stepped back, giving them space. Lily came to stand beside him, slipping her small hand back into his. "You did good, Daddy," she whispered. Through her tears, Evelyn looked up at Jack. Her makeup streaked down her face. "I don't deserve this," she said again. "None of us deserve grace," Jack replied quietly. "That's what makes it grace." Michael hugged his grandmother tighter, and Evelyn bent down to properly embrace him, her tears falling into his hair as she held him close. The morning sun continued to shine on the new shelter, its warmth touching everyone gathered there, witnesses to the power of forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. A gentle autumn breeze rustled through the newly planted garden outside the shelter. 6 weeks had passed since Evelyn's confession, and the building hummed with new life. The once abandoned property had transformed into a beacon of hope, its freshly painted walls gleaming under the morning sunday. Inside the shelter's main office, Jack sat across from Evelyn, who carefully slid a thick envelope across his desk. Her hands trembled slightly, her demeanor a far cry from the imperious woman who had once threatened to destroy him. "It's everything," she said softly, her voice catching. "The proceeds from selling my mansion, my investment accounts, all of it. The shelter needs it more than I do." Jack started to protest, but Evelyn raised her hand. "Please, Jack, let me do this, Michael." She smiled at the thought of her grandson. "He taught me what truly matters, and so did you, with your forgiveness." Down the hallway, sounds of life echoed, children's laughter, the clatter of pots in the community kitchen, veterans sharing stories over coffee. 3 families had already found temporary homes here, with 2 more expected next week. "We'll put it to good use," Jack promised, his voice warm. "Every penny will help someone rebuild their life." Evelyn nodded, wiping a tear. "That's all I ask." Later that afternoon, Jack and Lily stood in their new quarters, a modest 2-room wing of the shelter. Sunlight streamed through windows Lily had helped paint yellow, just as she'd once dreamed. Their few belongings fit perfectly in the cozy space, making it instantly feel like home. "Look, Daddy," Lily exclaimed, pointing to a handmade welcome sign on their door. The other shelter residents, both adults and children, had signed it with messages of love and gratitude. Jack watched as Lily traced the colorful signatures with her finger. Michael's distinctive scrawl stood out. "To my best friend, and the nicest man I know." The sound of footsteps drew their attention. Sarah, a veteran who'd been helping coordinate the shelter's daily operations, appeared in the doorway. "The Johnson family just arrived," she announced with a smile. "They have twins about Lily's age." Lily's face lit up. "Can I show them around, Daddy? Please?" Jack nodded, and she darted off with Sarah. He could hear her excited voice in the hallway, already making the newcomers feel welcome. Moving to the window, Jack gazed out at the shelter's courtyard. Veterans tended the vegetable garden they'd started, teaching children about growing food. A group of parents chatted on benches while their kids played on the newly installed playground equipment funded by Evelyn's donation. The sight stirred something deep in his heart. This place had become more than just a shelter, it was a community where broken people helped heal each other. He remembered the night of the fire, how close he'd come to giving up. Now, watching people find hope within these walls, he understood why God hadn't let him quit. The afternoon sun was setting when Lily returned, her eyes dancing with excitement. "The twins are so nice, Daddy. I showed them everything, and guess what? Their mom knows how to make friendship bracelets. She said she'll teach us tomorrow." Jack smiled, pulling her into a hug. Looking around their simple but warm home, at the photographs of her mother they'd carefully arranged, at the Bible on the bedside table, he felt rich in all the ways that mattered. "You know what, Daddy?" Lily said, snuggling closer. "You taught me what it really means to be rich." Jack's heart swelled at her words. "How's that, sweetheart?" Because being rich isn't about having lots of money or a big house, she explained. It's about having people who love you, and being able to help others, and knowing God's watching over us. Through the open window, they could hear the shelter's front doors swinging open, voices welcoming another family seeking refuge. Jack squeezed Lily's hand, lifting his eyes skyward in gratitude. The evening light painted the room in warm gold, and in that moment, Jack Carter, once a struggling single father, felt like the wealthiest man in the world. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.